Has served individuals with disabilities for nearly 4 decades. She serves as special education teacher, principal, federal programs director, and owned a private school for children as well. Dr. Aris is founded New Hope Advocacy, a non-profit organisation to advocate for troubled youths, parents, or children with disabilities. She's helped hundreds of families across America receive education, service, and support they need. Dr. Aris is currently developing New Hope Global Residential Academy to provide meaningful education and vocational training for undeserved youth and young adults. So I'm very excited to welcome Dr. Teresa, our next speaker, to the stage.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Oh my goodness, what a platform of amazing people we have heard from up to this point. And I am so grateful to have been able to listen to these amazing speakers prior to the opportunity to talk. What I heard, Yunisa, his story of his son just going on a date with his friend, and yet the actions of a youth that thought it was more important to be in power than respect the dignity and the life of his peers. Miss Cheryl grew up, had a life, had a career, and in one day that was taken away from her. When she gave her story, she mentioned that she was a mother at that time. What could her children have been going through at that period of time? Their mother, who was filled with strength in their lives, all of a sudden needed them. Faith in Kenya, the impactful, amazing person trying to empower men and boys in order to decrease the generational violence, or I'm sorry, the gender violence in a country that is so critical to our youth, not just decreasing the violence, but increasing the self-awareness, the self-respect, the respect and dignity for humanity and for the people that we share this earth with. What amazing story Miss Faith has and what she's doing, and Anna, the world traveler, who reminds us that our power is bigger than the length of our skin. It exceeds. If only the youth could know that, could believe that, and use that information to empower and inspire others. And Nick, oh my goodness, what a story. And I'm sorry for my dog in the background. I really apologize. Give me a thumbs up if it's really bad. I'm trying to shut her up. Nick, the story of your son. I can't imagine what was going through your heart. And still you went to work. You went home. You were a father. You were a husband. You were an employee. You were still taking care of business. And when a child goes without oxygen, as we all know, there is a tendency or a potential of some brain injury, which leads to a disability. And I have no doubt that you continue to bring that child, your son, a level of hope, a level of life, and a level of understanding. I'm going to switch gears. You guys are amazing, but all of your stories goes directly into what I'm here to speak today. And that is about bringing hope to our future generation of youth. I want to talk specifically about the area of schools, education. Imagine all of these children in an educational environment that says, sit down, be quiet, don't talk, do what you're told, do the work, turn it in the next day, and come back tomorrow and do it again. And in return, you will get a diploma. And with that diploma, we don't know what you're going to do. Don't really care. We might help you if you want to go to college. We might help you figure out some scholarships and whatnot to get there. You guys, every child in this world deserves a meaningful education. Meaningful education. I think on that we can all agree. The definition of meaningful, however, differs. It changes in time, it changes through cultures, it changes through the society, through what's happening in America, and sadly, it changes based on financial availability. In America, public education was founded, public education, where a child has a right to an education, was founded in 1839. At that time, in 1839, they were just given an education for reading, writing, and math. By 1918, however, meaningful education was determined to be the transformation of children into literate, moral, and productive citizens through reading, writing, and math. That was in 1918. Through the course of several years, that changed off and on. In 1942, my mother was born. In 1952, she contracted polio. Because of the effects of polio on her body, both mentally, physically, she ended up not being allowed to go to school. That disability interfered with her ability to get a meaningful education. Because her parents her father was in the military, so they could afford to send her to a Catholic school. She went to an all-girls Catholic school and was able to get an education in that regard in 1952, but not in a public school. It took nearly an entire century, all the way up until 1965, before the public education started looking at the rights of the low-income families, of the effects of racial discrimination, and the effects of discrimination based on disability. 1965. That act in 1965 was to allow these children with disabilities as well to become interposed with the government, with a public education, to make it important to look at what their needs were. So in 1975, so there was an act that was started, and it was called the Elementary and Secondary Education Act was developed. And that was an act that said, we're not only going to look at everybody as a whole, but we're going to start looking at and disaggregating the different levels of abilities of the kinds of children that we serve. It started, supposed to affect all children. It didn't exactly do that. So there was a lot of litigation, a lot of court hearings. Finally, in 1975, Education for All Handicapped Children came into the picture. And that stated that children with disabilities have a right to be educated with their peers. So there's another act that says we have a right to educate our peers, or to be educated with our peers, and it needs to be meaningful. That has gone through several revisions until in 2004 was the most recent. Education for All Handicapped Children changed to Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And now that takes more of a stance, a more legal stance for children with disabilities birth through the age of 21. Let me repeat that, birth through the ages of 21 in America. And I've talked to others in other countries as well. There are similar laws that regulate and provide support for parents of children with disabilities, for the individuals with disabilities. We have to start looking at what our youth need and stop looking at education as a one size fits all in order to get our children to what? To who's meaningful? What is meaningful? What was meaningful? What is meaningful to Nick's child? What was meaningful to the child that took the life of Eunice's son? We have to start looking at the mental, emotional, physical, and academic limitations of these kids, address these needs in our educational environment, or we are going to continue to put out a generation of youth that fight fires with weapons, fight disagreements with weapons, that do not have an understanding and a compassion for their peers, but instead they're going to look for ways to control, manipulate, and get what they want one way or another. There is a way to make a meaningful difference to these children. And that's why we're here today, to save the life of our youth across this world. Together, we can make a difference. I'm so grateful, so grateful.